I'll be speaking to Joel Kovel. As an academic, he taught in a wide variety of fields. He's been a professor of psychiatry, anthropology, and political science. He's written a number of books, including The Enemy of Nature and Overcoming Zionism. In 2001, he and Michael Lowy published the Ecosocialist Manifesto. In 2011, he founded the Ecosocialist Horizons Group. He'll be speaking in Connecticut on Thursday evening, June 25th in Hartford at the Carriage House Theater, and he's presently in New York City. Good morning.
Greetings.
You wrote an article entitled "The Future Will Be Eco-Socialist," because without eco-socialism, there will be no future. Do you mean that literally?
Yes. I don't mean it in the sense that the world will disappear or blow up or something like that, but I do feel very strongly, and it's a hard thing to talk about and to absorb, I do feel very strongly that we're living in an end-stage crisis of our system and world, and that there are ways out of it and ways to understand it, but that if we don't overcome it, the notion of a coherent future, that is to say, a perspective in time, is lost. I'm not saying that we're going to disappear as a species. I'm not saying anything that drastic. The Earth is a very small planet, but it's very big as far as we're concerned. But what I am saying is that we need to be cognizant of just how grave the crisis is.
Well, you're not alone. I mean, the World Bank, was it 2 years ago, said we're on a route to a 4-degree centigrade increase in world temperature. That's monstrous. Yes, and they talked about the cities, all the coastal cities getting flooded.
Yes, that's the case. And I want to emphasize, this is not any kind of, beating my own drum here, that I was saying this 20 years ago. I didn't give the numbers, but I did say it. And in 1998, I actually ran for the U.S. Senate because the Senate was about to be presented with the Kyoto protocols to limit greenhouse gases. And the Senate had said, these are dead on arrival. I found that monstrous. And I'm going to just turn this off. And so I was traveling New York State, and a couple of years later, I actually tried to get the presidential nomination of the Green Party. Oh, of course, just not to succeed, but just to bear the news and be sort of a prophet. And now the good thing is that there are millions of people responding to this. The bad thing is that the crisis is that much further along and no fundamental changes have been made. I grieve over this, but I think we have to be alert to it. I also want to say, and this is important, to bear in mind that climate change, whether the cities are inundated, whether droughts break down our food supplies and everything else, is no doubt a very spectacular manifestation, and it might be the one that puts the coup de grace, so to speak, to the historical project of Homo sapiens. However, it's a mistake to think that our problem can be delineated as one of climate change, that if somehow we can fix the climate or somehow, stop putting carbon into the atmosphere, that our worries are over. I mean, I don't want to just be Jeremiah here, but it's important to realize that there's a fundamental process of ecological breakdown, of which climate change is the leading form, but by no means the only form.
Yeah, and right in that, you reject environmentalism and favor an ecological approach, if I got you right. And if that's right, what is the difference?
Well, the difference is plain. It's unfortunate people don't think deeply enough about it. I do not take the term environmental beyond its literal implications, which is that it's what surrounds us, what surrounds us, what's not us. Ecological implies a relationship between ourselves and the world around us. So we're part of it. And when I talk about eco-socialism, I don't talk about some sort of quick fix panacea. I talk about it as a profound change in society, a new mode of production itself, and that's very important because the problem here is, of course, symptomatically the climate change or toxic, pollution of the oceans and so on and so forth. The problem is capitalism, and capitalism not viewed as a simple economic system, but rather as a whole way of existence. Humanity has gone through so many thousands of years of history, and it's good to divide that into ways in which we produce ourselves and produce nature so that we realize that capitalism is a phase in human history. It could be the last phase because it's collapsing and bringing down the planet with it, bringing down civilization with it. However, it's deeply important to realize that it's something that we have made as a species and we can unmake. And that
Let
capitalism
me.
is feudalism, and after capitalism, there'll be socialism or eco-socialism.
You say capitalism is pathological because it worships at the god of unending growth. Is that right?
Well, yes, it's a my only advanced degree was in medicine. I have an MD, and so I think sometimes in terms of diseases, it's not a bad way of thinking if you don't get carried away with it and use it usefully. But so I think of capitalism as a specific disease of the planet and the disease of our civilization of unending growth, and we understand diseases of that kind as cancer. Capitalism is social historical cancer. Uh, it's a mode of production that constantly has to expand the social product in order to maintain the ruling class dominant, society. And in doing that, it runs into endless contradictions as it expands, and the expansion is now reaching stages of basically dooming the process. Or you can think of it as a cancer that's gotten out of control and is going to be lethal. Just like if you have metastases all over your body, we have metastases all over the earth.
Yes. We've talked about climate change, but we didn't even mention what might be a part of it, which is the species extinction.
Oh
And
my
you've
gosh!
written about that.
Of course, if the level of species extinction is mind-boggling. It's something that has not happened for 60 million years, depending on how it looked at. We have raised the background production of species by about a factor of 1,000 over what was the case, a million years ago. And it's the capitalist system that does that, chiefly by destroying habitats, or by producing so many toxins and introducing new species. The level of change is destructive. It's not built according to a rational plan, but according to the logic of capital, which is to expand, which they call itself accumulate. Karl Marx had a way of saying this in Capital, this great masterwork. He said, accumulate, accumulate. That is Moses and the prophets, according to the capitalists. In other words, it has the power of a divine imperative. And indeed, if you look over the capitalist system, you'll see that there is no place in it that doesn't talk about accumulation and growth as though it were a good thing. And the idea of an equilibrium economy, of an economy that is grounded in society instead of controlling society from above, these ideas are scarcely ever reach the level of being discussed in mainstream media. They're never discussed in mainstream media. And
as you harshly criticize capitalism, you also talk about the communists from Lenin to Stalin and Trotsky as being anti-ecology. What do you mean by that?
Well, that's a very large subject. We only have a few minutes, and if about an hour here, I can take up that one. But no, I think the larger point is we must study this and work at that level, okay? Briefly speaking, first of all, a lot of things happened in those periods of rebellion against capitalism to produce socialism and then communism that were bad, but a lot of them also were very good and salutary. In fact, the Soviet Union during its first 10 years took a very, very serious and radical approach to nature. And there's an amazing amount of very deep and interesting thought, and Lenin was right for that. Now, I don't want to oversimplify, but you really can say that the failures of socialism consisted of not becoming socialist, but rather succumbing to the depredations of a capitalist world economy to which they were never able to, break loose from which. And that's obviously another huge, difficult point, but we must study that just like we study all of these things. And we must basically get the point that, yes, we do want to change climate. I want to emphasize something very, very serious here with what eco-socialism means, that I take critically but extremely seriously and positively all of the efforts to do things that would end the carbon age, would produce renewable energy and all of those matters. And there's an innumerable number of good and beneficial projects to be done. As an eco-socialist, what I just want to say is that those projects should all be considered in the light of the transformation of human society to a post-capitalist era. Otherwise, it's again, you use the cancer analogy, you're sort of, excising this wound here and there, you're repairing some lesion, but then the disease proceeds. It's like a leukemia. It's going to come out somewhere else. And it's that basic pathology that we have to pay attention to.
For my last question, let me ask about, I'm sorry.
There's much, much more to be said about this, which I hope to talk about in my lecture, which is in The Enemy of Nature, which is on the website ecosocialisthorizons.com, which perhaps people can look up. But it's a perspective at this point. I'm not saying we shouldn't cope with climate change. I'm saying it should be done within a framework that involves a social transformation in a more profound way.
Well, I was going to ask you about Eco-Socialist Horizons, and in our last minute, if you could just talk about that a little bit more.
Well, it's a small organization. It's not a membership group. It's not a political party. It exists to try to spread this idea. Myself and a young colleague, Quincy Saul, who's very promising, are embarking on another book, a sequel to The Enemy of Nature, which had 2 editions. We published, graphic novels. We have radio programs. It's mainly educative, but it's educative to bring that perspective. And also, very important factor in it is north-south orientations. We take the South much more importantly than as a mere repository of resources. We think very much that we need to find ways of linking these efforts all across the planet, and there's progress in this direction, and bringing in profound kinds of modes of knowing that preceded capital and are sort of embedded still in many instances throughout the South with indigenous peoples. So we take this as not just some kind of noble savage, but really a reclaiming of the fundamentals of our existence, free from the capitalist monster.
Well, that's a great place to end for now, and I'll be looking forward to your full talk on the 25th up in Hartford.
Thank you very much. It's only a beginning, and it's a struggle worth keeping up with because it lends life a certain integrity and purpose that I think most environmental activists can add to their existence. Thank you very much, Stanley.
We've been talking to Joel Kovel, and I'm Stan Heller for The Struggle. Thanks for watching.